In a destroyed living room at 2:17 a.m., a 30-year-old daughter was about to make an impossible choice. What started as a terrified phone call took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her mother's destruction. Eleanor Miller wasn't your typical daughter. For 30 years, she had been a crisis intervention social worker, known for protecting vulnerable children. When she encountered her mother Linda destroying Emma's art supplies in an alcohol-fueled rage, she had no idea she was walking into a custody battle that would tear their family apart. Eleanor made a decision that would lead to choosing her mother's safe-it. What began as emergency intervention would become legal warfare. The family would never recover. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The phone's shrill cry cut through the darkness at 2:17 a.m., pulling Eleanor Miller from the thin sleep that had become her norm. Her hand found the receiver before her mind, fully engaged. Muscle memory from 30 years of social work emergencies. "Grandma Eleanor?" The whisper was barely audible, threaded with terror. "She's destroying everything. I'm in my closet, but I can hear her." Shattering glass exploded through the phone, followed by Linda's voice, alcohol-slurred and venomous. "Where's that damn sketchbook? You think you can hide from me?" Eleanor was already moving, bare feet finding slippers while cradling the phone. At 71, her body protested, but her mind, honed by decades of crisis intervention, snapped into professional focus. "Emma, sweetheart, stay exactly where you are. I'm coming. Keep the phone with you, but put it on silent." "I'm scared, Grandma." "She found my canvas from art class, the one Mrs. Torres said was gallery quality." Emma's voice broke as another crash echoed through the connection. Eleanor's jaw clenched. The canvas Emma had spent weeks perfecting. The girl had such talent, such promise. If only... "Breathe with me, Emma. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Remember?" Eleanor coached while grabbing her keys and the small leather notebook hidden in her nightstand. The notebook Linda would never see coming. Through the phone, Linda's rampage continued. "Ungrateful little brat. Think your precious grandmother gives a damn? She's just trying to make me look bad, like she always has." Eleanor's heart hammered as she slipped into the October night. The documentation in her notebook painted a clear picture. 43 incidents over 8 months, each carefully recorded with dates, times, photographs when possible. Linda's drinking had escalated, but the pattern went back years. The 15-minute drive felt eternal. Eleanor could hear the destruction before reaching the front door. Furniture scraping, objects hitting walls, Linda's voice rising and falling in waves of rage and self-pity. "Emma, I'm outside. She's in the living room. Front door's unlocked. It always is when she's like this. My room's upstairs, second door." Eleanor found Emma huddled in the walk-in closet behind hanging clothes, arms wrapped around knees drawn to her chest. The girl's dark hair hung in tangles, and her eyes, so much like Eleanor's own, held the hollow look Eleanor had seen too many times professionally. The look of a child learning that their protector was actually the danger. "Oh, my darling girl." Eleanor eased down beside Emma, ignoring protesting knees. Emma fell against her grandmother's shoulder, trembling. "She destroyed everything. All my art supplies, my easel, even the painting I was working on for your birthday." Linda's voice drifted up from below, now tearful and slurred. "Emma? Baby, where are you? Mommy's sorry. Come help Mommy clean up this mess." Eleanor's trained ear caught the manipulation, the shift from rage to victimhood, making Emma responsible for Linda's destructive episode. Classic patterns from countless case files. "Stay here," Eleanor murmured, but Emma's grip tightened. "Don't leave me. What if she comes up here?" Eleanor's resolve crystallized. 43 incidents, 8 months of escalation. Now Linda was destroying the one thing that brought Emma joy. Her art, her future. "I won't leave you alone with her again," Eleanor said quietly, words carrying more weight than Emma could understand. Linda stood amid the living room wreckage when Eleanor appeared downstairs. Paint tubes lay twisted and emptied across hardwood floors. Canvas frames splintered. Brushes snapped. The easel Eleanor had bought Emma lay on its side, one leg broken. "Mom!" Linda's voice carried bitter mockery. "Of course you'd come running. Can't let me parent my own daughter, can you?" At 45, Linda still carried traces of former beauty, but alcohol and bitterness had hardened her features. Tonight her eyes held the glassy sheen Eleanor recognized as dangerous. "This isn't parenting, Linda, this is destruction. Don't you dare judge me! You think you're so perfect? Look how I turned out, Mother. Look what your perfect parenting created." Eleanor had heard these accusations for years. Linda's failures were always someone else's fault. Never Linda's choices, never her refusal to accept help. "I made mistakes raising you," Eleanor said evenly. "But Emma doesn't deserve to pay for them. Emma's fine. She's dramatic, like you taught her. This stuff was taking over the house. A girl her age should be thinking about boys and makeup, not paint and brushes." Eleanor watched Linda dismiss Emma's exceptional talent as unworthy. This wasn't just neglect, it was active sabotage of Emma's future. "She's gifted, Linda. Her teachers don't know anything. Neither do you." Linda's face contorted with rage. "You poisoned her against me, always taking her side, making me the villain. Well, I'm done with it. Done with both of you." The words hung like a physical presence. Eleanor had documented threats before, but this felt different. Final. "What are you saying, Linda? Maybe it's time you learned what it feels like to lose someone you love. How would you like it if I took Emma away? Found us an apartment across the country where interfering grandmothers can't stick their noses where they don't belong?" Eleanor's blood chilled. The threat wasn't idle. Linda was capable of following through out of spite. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by raised voices despite Eleanor's instruction to stay hidden. "Mom, are you okay?" Linda's expression shifted instantly, rage melting into theatrical sorrow. "Oh, baby, Mommy's so sorry. I got upset because Grandma Eleanor was being mean to me again." Eleanor watched the manipulation unfold with professional recognition and personal horror, but Emma wasn't buying it. At 16, she'd learned to read her mother's moods. "Mom, you destroyed my art." "It was an accident, sweetheart. We can replace all of it. The painting I worked on for 3 weeks, my brushes that Grandma Eleanor—" "Stop!" Linda's mask slipped. "Everything is always about what Grandma Eleanor bought you," said, "Thanks. What about what your mother needs?" Emma's silence was answer enough. Eleanor saw the moment Linda realized she'd lost her daughter's sympathy. The rage that followed was swift and absolute. "Fine! You want your precious grandmother? You can have her. Because I'm done being the villain where Eleanor Miller is the perfect saint." She spun toward Eleanor, face twisted with accumulated resentment. "You want to know something, Mother? You're not my mother anymore. You hear me? You stopped being my mother the day you decided Emma was more important." The words hit like physical blows, but Eleanor's training held. "Linda, no, I'm done listening, done pretending I need your approval. You think you can do better? Prove it." Linda stalked toward the door, grabbing purse and keys. "When I come back, I want you gone. Emma can spend tonight at your house, but tomorrow she comes home and we start over. Without you." The door slammed with enough force to rattle windows. Eleanor and Emma stood in sudden silence, surrounded by wreckage. "Is she coming back tonight?" Emma asked quietly. Eleanor looked at the destruction. Not just physical damage, but emotional carnage of a mother destroying her child's dreams to strike at perceived enemies. "I don't think so, sweetheart. And even if she does, you're not staying here." As Emma packed clothes upstairs, Eleanor pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact she'd hoped never to use. David Kim, family attorney. "David, it's Eleanor Miller. I need to implement the plan we discussed. Please call me as soon as possible." "It's time." She ended the call and looked around Linda's living room one last time. It wasn't Emma's destroyed art or Linda's threats that had finally broken Eleanor's last hope for her daughter's redemption. It was the look in Emma's eyes when Linda asked what her mother needed. The look that said Emma had already learned to put her mother's emotional demands before her own welfare. After 30 years of saving other people's children, Eleanor Miller was finally going to save her own granddaughter, even if it meant losing her daughter forever. The phone's shrill cry cut through the darkness at 2:17 a.m., pulling Eleanor Miller from the thin sleep that had become her norm. Her hand found the receiver before her mind fully engaged, muscle memory from 30 years of social work emergencies. "Grandma Eleanor?" The whisper was barely audible, threaded with terror. "She's destroying everything. I'm in my closet, but I can hear her." Shattering glass exploded through the phone, followed by Linda's voice, alcohol slurred and venomous. "Where's that damn sketchbook? You think you can hide from me?" Eleanor was already moving, bare feet finding slippers while cradling the phone. At 71, her body protested, but her mind, honed by decades of crisis intervention, snapped into professional focus. "Emma, sweetheart, stay exactly where you are." "I'm coming. Keep the phone with you, but put it on silent." "I'm scared, Grandma. She found my canvas from art class. The one Mrs. Torres said was gallery quality." Emma's voice broke as another crash echoed through the connection. Eleanor's jaw clenched. The canvas Emma had spent weeks perfecting. The girl had such talent, such promise, if only. "Breathe with me, Emma. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Remember?" Eleanor coached while grabbing her keys and the small leather notebook hidden in her nightstand. The notebook Linda would never see coming. Through the phone, Linda's rampage continued. "Ungrateful little brat! Think your precious grandmother gives a damn? She's just trying to make me look bad, like she always has." Eleanor's heart hammered as she slipped into the October night. The documentation in her notebook painted a clear picture, 43 incidents over 8 months, each carefully recorded with dates, times, photographs when possible. Linda's drinking had escalated, but the pattern went back years. The 15-minute drive felt eternal. Eleanor could hear the destruction before reaching the front door. Furniture scraping, objects hitting walls, Linda's voice rising and falling in waves of rage and self-pity. "Emma? I'm outside." "She's in the living room. Front door's unlocked. It always is when she's like this. My room's upstairs, second door." Eleanor found Emma huddled in the walk-in closet behind hanging clothes, arms wrapped around knees drawn to her chest. The girl's dark hair hung in tangles, and her eyes, so much like Eleanor's own, held the hollow look Eleanor had seen too many times professionally. The look of a child learning that their protector was actually the danger. "Oh, my darling girl." Eleanor eased down beside Emma, ignoring protesting knees. Emma fell against her grandmother's shoulder, trembling. "She destroyed everything. All my art supplies, my easel, even the painting I was working on for your birthday." Linda's voice drifted up from below, now tearful and slurred. "Emma? Baby, where are you? Mommy's sorry. Come help Mommy clean up this mess." Eleanor's trained ear caught the manipulation, the shift from rage to victimhood, making Emma responsible for Linda's destructive episode. Classic patterns from countless case files. "Stay here," Eleanor murmured, but Emma's grip tightened. "Don't leave me. What if she comes up here?" Eleanor's resolve crystallized. 43 incidents. 8 months of escalation. Now Linda was destroying the one thing that brought Emma joy. Her art. Her future. "I won't leave you alone with her again," Eleanor said quietly, words carrying more weight than Emma could understand. Linda stood amid the living room wreckage when Eleanor appeared downstairs. Paint tubes lay twisted and emptied across hardwood floors. Canvas frames splintered. Brushes snapped. The easel Eleanor had bought Emma lay on its side, one leg broken. "Mom!" Linda's voice carried bitter mockery. "Of course you'd come running. Can't let me parent my own daughter, can you?" At 45, Linda still carried traces of former beauty, but alcohol and bitterness had hardened her features. Tonight, her eyes held the glassy sheen Eleanor recognized as dangerous. "This isn't parenting, Linda. This is destruction." "Don't you dare judge me. You think you're so perfect? Look how I turned out, Mother. Look what your perfect parenting created." Eleanor had heard these accusations for years. Linda's failures were always someone else's fault. Never Linda's choices, never her refusal to accept help. "I made mistakes raising you," Eleanor said evenly. "But Emma doesn't deserve to pay for them." "Emma's fine. She's dramatic like you taught her. This stuff was taking over the house. A girl her age should be thinking about boys and makeup, not paint and brushes." Eleanor watched Linda dismiss Emma's exceptional talent as unworthy. This wasn't just neglect, it was active sabotage of Emma's future. "She's gifted, Linda. Her teachers don't know anything. Neither do you." Linda's face contorted with rage. "You poisoned her against me, always taking her side, making me the villain. Well, I'm done with it. Done with both of you." The words hung like a physical presence. Eleanor had documented threats before, but this felt different. Final. "What are you saying, Linda? Maybe it's time you learned what it feels like to lose someone you love. How would you like it if I took Emma away? Found us an apartment across the country where interfering grandmothers can't stick their noses where they don't belong?" Eleanor's blood chilled. The threat wasn't idle. Linda was capable of following through out of spite. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by raised voices despite Eleanor's instruction to stay hidden. "Mom? Are you okay?" Linda's expression shifted instantly, rage melting into theatrical sorrow. "Oh, baby, Mommy's so sorry. I got upset because Grandma Eleanor was being mean to me again." Eleanor watched the manipulation unfold with professional recognition and personal horror. But Emma wasn't buying it. At 16, she'd learned to read her mother's moods. "Mom, you destroyed my art." "It was an accident, sweetheart. We can replace all of it. The painting I worked on for 3 weeks. My brushes that Grandma Eleanor." "Stop!" Linda's mask slipped. "Everything is always about what Grandma Eleanor bought you, thinks. What about what your mother needs?" Emma's silence was answer enough. Eleanor saw the moment Linda realized she'd lost her daughter's sympathy. The rage that followed was swift and absolute. "Fine, you want your precious grandmother? You can have her. Because I'm done being the villain, where Eleanor Miller is the perfect saint." She spun toward Eleanor, face twisted with accumulated resentment. "You want to know something, Mother? You're not my mother anymore. You hear me? You stopped being my mother the day you decided Emma was more important." The words hit like physical blows, but Eleanor's training held. "Linda? No. I'm done listening, done pretending I need your approval. You think you can do better? Prove it." Linda stalked toward the door, grabbing purse and keys. "When I come back, I want you gone. Emma can spend tonight at your house, but tomorrow she comes home and we start over, without you." The door slammed with enough force to rattle windows. Eleanor and Emma stood in sudden silence, surrounded by wreckage. "Is she coming back tonight?" Emma asked quietly. Eleanor looked at the destruction, not just physical damage, but emotional carnage of a mother destroying her child's dreams to strike at perceived enemies. "I don't think so, sweetheart. And even if she does, you're not staying here." As Emma packed clothes upstairs, Eleanor pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact she'd hoped never to use, David Kim, family attorney. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "David, it's Eleanor Miller. I need to implement the plan we discussed. Please call me as soon as possible." "It's time." She ended the call and looked around Linda's living room one last time. It wasn't Emma's destroyed art or Linda's threats that had finally broken Eleanor's last hope for her daughter's redemption. It was the look in Emma's eyes when Linda asked what her mother needed. The look that said Emma had already learned to put her mother's emotional demands before her own welfare. David Kim's voice was professionally crisp, despite the early hour when he returned Eleanor's call at 6:30 a.m. "Eleanor? I got your message. Are you and Emma safe? We're at my house. Emma's finally asleep." Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the suburban street in soft gold. The normalcy felt surreal after the night's chaos. "David, I need to move forward with custody proceedings. Last night was..." She paused, searching for words that could encompass Linda's destruction, her threats, her final disavowal of their relationship. "Tell me what happened." Eleanor's training kicked in as she recounted the events with clinical precision. David listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification. When she finished, silence stretched between them. Eleanor, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about this? Family court is brutal, and Linda will fight dirty. Your age will be questioned, your motives scrutinized. Once we file, there's no going back to the way things were. At 71, Eleanor had buried a husband, raised a difficult daughter, and spent 3 decades navigating the treacherous waters of child welfare. She understood the gravity of David's warning. My daughter declared me no longer her mother last night, Eleanor said quietly. She's made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Then we meet today. 2 o'clock? I'll be there. Eleanor spent the morning organizing her documentation while Emma slept. The leather notebook contained 43 meticulously recorded incidents, but surrounding it lay a broader collection. Photographs of Emma's unexplained bruises, medical records from emergency room visits Linda had dismissed as accidents, report cards showing Emma's grades declining during Linda's worst periods, then improving dramatically when she stayed extended periods with Eleanor. The most damaging evidence was Linda's own voice, recordings Eleanor had made during supervised visits after previous incidents, capturing Linda's manipulation tactics and emotional volatility. Eleanor's social work background had taught her that documentation was everything in family court. By noon, Emma emerged from the guest room that had gradually become her sanctuary. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her voice was steady. Grandma, what happens now? Eleanor set down her coffee and studied her granddaughter's face. At 16, Emma possessed an unsettling maturity born from navigating her mother's instability. The girl deserved honesty. I'm meeting with a lawyer this afternoon. I'm going to petition for legal custody of you. Emma's reaction wasn't surprise. It was relief so profound it seemed to drain tension from her entire body. Will it work? Can you really? I don't know, sweetheart. Your mother will fight it. She'll say terrible things about both of us. Are you prepared for that? Emma nodded, then hesitated. Will I have to testify? In court, I mean. Possibly. Would you be able to do that? If it means I don't have to go back there, yes. Emma's voice carried quiet determination. Grandma, I love my mom, but I can't keep living like this. I can't keep waiting for her to get better. Eleanor's heart broke and swelled simultaneously. This child had learned truths it should have taken decades to understand. David Kim's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian downtown. At 55, David projected competence and compassion in equal measure, qualities that had made him Eleanor's first choice when she'd begun researching family attorneys months ago. Eleanor, before we begin, I need to address the elephant in the room. David's tone was gentle but direct. You're 71 years old. Linda's attorney will argue that you're too old to raise a teenager, that Emma needs a younger guardian. How do we counter that? Eleanor had anticipated this challenge. With evidence of my capability and Emma's needs, I have medical clearance from my physician, financial stability, and a support network. More importantly, I have what Emma needs most: consistency and emotional safety. Tell me about your support network. Margaret Foster, Maggie, is my closest friend and former colleague. 30-year veteran of Child Protective Services, recently retired. She's agreed to serve as character witness and backup guardian if needed. Eleanor pulled out a manila folder. Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's pediatrician, has documented the correlation between Linda's episodes and Emma's stress-related symptoms. Mrs. Torres, Emma's art teacher, can testify to the dramatic changes in Emma's work and behavior depending on her home situation. David reviewed the documents, his expression growing more impressed with each page. This is thorough work. You've been planning this for months. Since January. Linda's behavior was escalating, and I recognized the pattern from my professional experience. I hoped intervention wouldn't be necessary, but I prepared for the possibility. What changed your mind about intervention? Eleanor described Linda's systematic destruction of Emma's art supplies, her threats to relocate across the country, her declaration that Eleanor was no longer her mother. David made notes, occasionally shaking his head. Eleanor, I'm going to be frank. This case isn't just about custody. It's about severing a parent-child relationship. Linda has legal rights. Even with this evidence, family courts prefer to preserve parental bonds when possible. And if preserving those bonds means sacrificing Emma's welfare, then we fight. But understand, Linda will portray you as a vindictive grandmother trying to steal her daughter. She'll claim you've manipulated Emma against her, that your age makes you unsuitable. The process will be ugly. Eleanor thought of Emma's relief that morning, the way the girl's shoulders had relaxed when Eleanor explained her intentions. David, I've spent 30 years watching children suffer because adults were more concerned with preserving family structures than protecting the children within them. I won't do that to Emma. Then we file Monday morning. I'll need Emma's statement, medical records, school reports, and character references. Can you arrange that? Already in progress. That evening, Eleanor called Maggie Foster. Her former colleague answered on the second ring, voice warm with familiar affection. Eleanor, how are you holding up after last night? Maggie was the only person who knew the full extent of Eleanor's concerns about Linda. During their social work careers, they'd consulted each other on difficult cases, providing professional objectivity when emotions threatened to cloud judgment. I'm filing for custody Monday. Silence stretched before Maggie spoke, her voice heavy with understanding. Oh, honey, you're really doing this. She's destroying Emma, Maggie. Systematically. Deliberately. Last night she demolished thousands of dollars worth of art supplies, just to hurt me through Emma, then threatened to take Emma across the country. Have you considered what this will do to you? Emotionally, I mean. You're not just fighting for Emma. You're giving up on Linda completely. Eleanor stared out her living room window toward Linda's neighborhood. I gave up on Linda years ago. I just couldn't admit it until now. What do you need from me? Character witness. Backup guardian if something happens to me. And, Eleanor's voice caught, a friend who understands why I have to choose my granddaughter over my daughter. You have all three, without question. Eleanor, you're doing the right thing. That little girl needs someone who puts her first. After hanging up, Eleanor found Emma at the kitchen table, sketching in a pad she'd rescued from Linda's destruction. The drawing showed two figures, an elderly woman and a young girl, standing together against a stormy sky. The woman's hand rested protectively on the girl's shoulder. It's us, isn't it? Eleanor asked softly. Emma nodded. I started it this morning. I call it Safe Harbor. Eleanor studied her granddaughter's face. Determined, hopeful, no longer carrying the constant tension that had defined her features for months. Whatever battles lay ahead, Emma was already healing simply by knowing someone was finally fighting for her. The machinery of legal intervention was now in motion. Monday would bring formal filings, court dates, and the beginning of a custody battle that would either save Emma or destroy what remained of their fractured family. But looking at Emma's drawing, Eleanor knew she'd already won the only victory that truly mattered. Her granddaughter's trust that someone finally loved her enough to risk everything. You have all three, without question. Eleanor, you're doing the right thing. That little girl needs someone who puts her first. After hanging up, Eleanor found Emma at the kitchen table, sketching in a pad she'd rescued from Linda's destruction. The drawing showed two figures, an elderly woman and a young girl, standing together against a stormy sky. The woman's hand rested protectively on the girl's shoulder. It's us, isn't it? Eleanor asked softly. Emma nodded. I started it this morning. I call it Safe Harbor. Eleanor studied her granddaughter's face. Determined, hopeful, no longer carrying the constant tension that had defined her features for months. Whatever battles lay ahead, Emma was already healing simply by knowing someone was finally fighting for her. Eleanor sat in her car outside Linda's house Sunday afternoon, gathering courage for what might be their final conversation as mother and daughter. David had advised against this meeting, warning that anything Linda said could complicate their legal strategy. But Eleanor's 30 years in social work had taught her that some bridges shouldn't be burned without first attempting to build them. Her phone, set to record, rested in her jacket pocket. If Linda chose destruction over reconciliation, Eleanor would have evidence. But she prayed it wouldn't come to that. The front door opened before Eleanor could knock. Linda stood in the doorway, still wearing yesterday's clothes, mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes. The living room behind her remained a disaster zone of destroyed art supplies and overturned furniture. "I figured you'd show up eventually." Linda's voice carried exhaustion beneath the hostility. "Come to gloat about stealing my daughter?" "I came to talk. One last time." Eleanor stepped inside, noting the empty wine bottles scattered across the coffee table. "Linda, it doesn't have to be this way." "Doesn't it?" Linda laughed bitterly, gesturing at the chaos around them. "You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Documenting every mistake, every bad day, waiting for the perfect moment to swoop in and play savior." Eleanor's trained eye caught the paranoia threading through Linda's accusations, a concerning escalation from previous episodes. "I've been worried about Emma. About both of you." "Bullshit." Linda moved toward the kitchen, Eleanor following. "You've been building a case. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about concern." "Then let's be honest." Eleanor kept her voice level professional. "Emma called me at 2 a.m., terrified, hiding in her closet while you destroyed everything she cares about. That's not a mother having a bad day. That's emotional abuse." Linda spun around, eyes blazing. "Emotional abuse? You want to talk about emotional abuse? What about a mother who undermines every decision I make? Who turns my daughter against me with expensive gifts and weekend trips? Who makes me feel like a failure every time I walk into a room?" "Linda, I've never what? Never criticized my parenting? Never looked at me with that disappointed face you perfected when I was 16? Never made Emma think she'd be better off without me?" Eleanor recognized the deflection, classic narcissistic behavior, turning legitimate concerns about Linda's actions into attacks on Linda's victimhood. But beneath the manipulation, she heard genuine pain. Her daughter was suffering, had been suffering for years. The tragedy was that Linda's pain had become Emma's burden. "I'm not your enemy, Linda. I want to help. By taking Emma away from me? By getting you the help you need. Therapy, substance abuse counseling. I don't have a drinking problem." Linda's voice pitched higher, spit flying with the words. "I have a mother problem. I have a daughter who's been poisoned against me. I have a life that's falling apart because everyone expects me to be perfect, like Saint Eleanor." Eleanor watched her daughter unravel, seeing the scared child Linda had once been beneath the angry woman she'd become. But Emma couldn't wait for Linda to heal. Children didn't have the luxury of waiting for broken parents to fix themselves. "What do you want from me, Linda? What would it take for you to get help?" Linda's expression shifted, cunning replacing rage. "I want you gone. Out of our lives completely. No more visits, no more phone calls, no more interfering. Emma is my daughter, not yours. And if I agree to that, will you get treatment? Why should I? There's nothing wrong with me that a little peace wouldn't cure." Eleanor's heart sank. She'd encountered this delusion countless times professionally. Parents who genuinely believed their destructive behavior was justified, that their children's distress was manipulation rather than legitimate trauma response. "Linda, last night you destroyed Emma's art supplies in a drunken rage. You threatened to take her away from everything stable in her life out of spite. You told me I was no longer your mother. How is any of that healthy parenting?" "I was upset. You'd been filling Emma's head with poison about me again, making her think she was too good for her own mother. Sometimes a parent has to remind their child who's in charge." Eleanor stared at her daughter, searching for any trace of self-awareness, any recognition that her behavior was damaging Emma. She found none. "Linda, listen to yourself. You're justifying terrorizing your own child." "Terrorizing?" Linda's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Is that what you call it when I finally stand up for myself? When I refuse to let you turn my daughter into another you? Cold, judgmental, always thinking she knows better than everyone else?" The words hit Eleanor like physical blows. This was how Linda truly saw her, not as a loving mother who'd sacrificed everything for her daughter's welfare, but as a controlling figure who'd damaged Linda's self-worth. "Is that really what you think? That I was cold? Judgmental? I think you never let me be good enough. Never let me make mistakes without consequences. Never let me be human." Linda's voice cracked, years of resentment pouring out. "And now you're doing the same thing to Emma, filling her head with impossible standards, making her ashamed of her own mother. Eleanor saw the twisted logic clearly now. In Linda's mind, Eleanor's stability and competence weren't gifts to be grateful for. They were weapons used to highlight Linda's failures. Emma's love for her grandmother wasn't natural affection. It was evidence of Eleanor's manipulation. Linda, Emma loves you. She's terrified of you, but she loves you. That's why this is so hard for her. If she loved me, she wouldn't run to you every time we have a problem. If she loved me, she'd choose me over you. The demand hung in the air like a challenge. Eleanor realized with growing horror that Linda genuinely expected Emma to choose between them, to prove her loyalty by rejecting the one stable adult in her life. You can't ask a child to choose between the adults who should both be protecting her. Watch me. Linda's smile was cold, triumphant. When Emma comes home tomorrow, she's going to learn what family loyalty really means. She's going to understand that you can't have both of us. Eleanor's blood chilled. This wasn't grief or anger. It was calculated emotional warfare using Emma as the battlefield. Linda, please, don't put Emma in that position. She's just a child. She's my child. And it's time she learned that blood is thicker than your manipulation. Eleanor pulled out her phone, ending the recording that had captured Linda's threats, her refusal to seek help, her plan to force Emma into an impossible choice. The evidence was devastating, but the cost was finally, irrevocably losing any hope of saving her daughter. You're really going to do this, Eleanor said quietly. You're going to destroy Emma's relationship with me, rather than examine your own behavior. I'm going to save my daughter from you. The way I should have years ago. Eleanor looked around Linda's house one final time, at the destroyed art supplies, the empty bottles, the chaos that had become Emma's normal. Then she looked at her daughter, seeing clearly now what Linda had chosen. Then you've made your decision. And I've made mine. Meaning? Eleanor walked toward the door, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd finally stopped hoping for miracles. Meaning Emma won't be coming home tomorrow. Or ever. Linda's face contorted with rage. You can't. I can. I will. And Linda? Eleanor paused at the door. You were wrong about one thing. Emma won't have to choose between us. You've already chosen her. The door closed behind Eleanor with finality. In her car, she sat for a moment in the gathering dusk, processing the conversation. Linda had confirmed every fear, validated every concern, and demonstrated exactly why Emma needed protection. Tomorrow, David would file custody papers. The legal battle would be brutal, but Eleanor had what she needed: evidence of Linda's instability, her threats against Emma, her refusal to acknowledge problems or seek help. More importantly, Eleanor finally had clarity. For years, she'd hoped Linda would change, that maternal love would eventually overcome addiction and narcissism. But some people couldn't be saved from themselves. Emma could be saved, though. Emma would be saved. Eleanor started her car and drove toward home, where her granddaughter waited. The girl who called her safe harbor in her artwork would never again have to choose between love and loyalty, between safety and family obligation. The county courthouse Monday morning buzzed with the routine chaos of legal proceedings. Eleanor sat beside David Kim in the family court clerk's office, watching him organize the custody petition that would forever change their lives. The manila folder containing 43 documented incidents felt heavier than its physical weight suggested. Eleanor, once I file this, there's no turning back, David said, his hand resting on the paperwork. Are you absolutely certain? Eleanor thought of Emma, who'd spent Sunday evening quietly packing more belongings, moving through the motions with the efficiency of someone who'd learned not to get too attached to stability. I'm certain. The clerk processed their filing with practiced indifference, stamping documents and scheduling hearings as if she were handling routine paperwork rather than the legal dissolution of a family. Emergency custody hearing, Thursday 9 a.m., Judge Patricia Hendricks presiding. 4 days, David murmured as they left the courthouse. That's unusually fast, but Judge Hendricks specializes in child welfare cases. She won't let Emma remain in limbo longer than necessary. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Emma's school. Emma Miller absent today. Please confirm the excuse. Eleanor closed her eyes, realizing she'd been so focused on legal strategy that she'd forgotten the practical details of caring for a teenager. David, what are the parameters while we await the hearing? Can Emma attend school? What if Linda shows up at my house? Emma can attend school from your address. I'll file a temporary restraining order preventing Linda from removing Emma from your care or harassing either of you. But Eleanor, David's expression grew serious. Linda will be served papers tomorrow. Once she realizes what's happening, she'll hire her own attorney. Are you prepared for what comes next? Eleanor had spent 30 years watching parents manipulate legal systems, turn children against protective family members, and weaponize love itself. I'm as prepared as anyone can be for watching their daughter try to destroy their granddaughter's chance at a normal life. That afternoon, Eleanor sat across from Dr. Patricia Vance, the court-appointed psychologist who would evaluate Emma's mental state and living situation preferences. Dr. Vance was younger than Eleanor had expected, perhaps 45, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Miller, I need to understand Emma's perspective before I make my recommendation to the court. How has she responded to this custody petition? With relief, Eleanor answered honestly, and guilt about feeling relieved. She loves her mother, but she's exhausted from managing Linda's emotional instability. Tell me about Emma's relationship with her mother. Eleanor had prepared for this question, knowing that any hint of coaching or manipulation would destroy their case. Emma has spent years trying to be the adult in their relationship. She monitors Linda's moods, hides her own needs to avoid triggering Linda's rages, and has learned to view her own success, particularly in art, as somehow betraying her mother. Dr. Vance made notes. And her relationship with you? Emma sees me as a safe harbor. She knows she can be honest with me without triggering an emotional crisis. She can pursue her talents without being made to feel guilty for excelling. Mrs. Miller, I have to address the obvious concern. You're 71 years old. Are you physically and emotionally capable of raising a teenager? Eleanor had anticipated this challenge. Dr. Vance, I had Emma's pediatrician conduct a comprehensive evaluation of my health. I have excellent blood pressure, good mobility, sharp cognitive function. More importantly, I have 30 years of professional experience helping traumatized children heal. Emma doesn't need a young guardian. She needs a stable one. What about Emma's father? Emma's father left when she was 3. No contact, no support. Linda has had a series of relationships, but none lasting more than 18 months. Emma has never had a stable male figure in her life. Dr. Vance's questions continued for an hour, probing Eleanor's motivations, her relationship with Linda, her understanding of Emma's needs. Eleanor answered each one with the professional objectivity that had served her throughout her career, but beneath the clinical language was a grandmother's fierce love. Tuesday morning brought the process server's confirmation. Linda had been served custody papers at 7:30 a.m. Eleanor's phone rang 20 minutes later. You destroyed my family. Linda's voice was hoarse, either from crying or screaming. My own mother destroyed my family. Linda, this doesn't have to. Don't you dare. Linda's shriek was loud enough to make Eleanor hold the phone away from her ear. Don't you dare pretend this is about Emma's welfare. This is about control. This is about you proving you're the better mother. Eleanor remained silent, letting Linda's rage burn itself out while mentally recording every threat, every admission. I'm hiring a lawyer, Linda continued, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than screaming. And when I'm done with you, Emma will never want to see you again. You think you know manipulation? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Linda, the line went dead. Eleanor immediately called David, reporting the threatening call. We need to document everything, he advised. Linda's going to try to paint you as the manipulative party. Her own behavior will be our best defense, but we need it on record. That afternoon, Eleanor received a call from Emma's school. Mrs. Miller? This is Principal Davidson. We had an incident today. Linda Miller appeared at school during lunch, demanding to see Emma. When we explained Emma was absent, she became agitated. Security had to escort her from the premises. Eleanor's blood chilled. Was Emma there? Did Linda see her? No, Emma wasn't on campus. But Mrs. Miller left several messages with the office staff, insisting Emma was being, quote, held against her will. We thought you should know. Eleanor thanked the principal and immediately called Emma, who was at the public library working on art projects. Sweetheart, your mother came to school today. You need to come home now. The fear in Emma's voice was immediate. What did she do? Is she okay? Even now, Emma's first concern was for her mother's welfare. Eleanor's heart ached for this child who'd been taught to manage adult emotions before learning to manage her own. She's upset about the custody hearing. Emma, I need you to understand. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Your mother is going to say things about me, about you, that aren't true. Can you handle that? Grandma, I've been handling Mom's versions of reality my whole life. I know who you are. I know who she is. I know who I want to be. That evening, David called with news. Linda hired Mitchell Barnes. He's aggressive, expensive, and specializes in portraying grandparents as interfering manipulators. Eleanor, he's already filed a counterpetition claiming you've alienated Emma from her mother and are unfit to serve as guardian due to age-related cognitive decline. Eleanor felt a flash of anger. Cognitive decline? It's a standard tactic. They'll demand cognitive testing, suggest you're confused about Emma's actual welfare, claim you're reliving your professional career through Emma's situation. Barnes is good at creating doubt. Then we'll have to be better at presenting the truth. Eleanor spent Tuesday night reviewing her documentation one final time. 43 incidents, medical records, school reports, recordings of Linda's threats and manipulative tactics. The evidence was overwhelming, but she'd learned never to underestimate a desperate parent's ability to weaponize the legal system. Emma sat at the kitchen table, working on a charcoal drawing that showed a small figure standing between two towering shadows, one reaching out protectively, the other grasping with clawed hands. Another self-portrait? Eleanor asked gently. Emma nodded. Mrs. Torres says art helps process trauma. I'm calling this one the choice. Eleanor studied the drawing, noting how the protective shadow seemed to shield the small figure from the grasping one. Emma, you know this isn't really your choice to make. You're not responsible for choosing between adults who should both be protecting you. I know, Emma said quietly. But Mom doesn't see it that way. She never has. Outside, darkness was falling on what might be their last quiet evening before the custody battle began in earnest. Tomorrow would bring depositions, character assassinations, and Linda's desperate attempts to reclaim control over the daughter she'd spent years emotionally terrorizing. But Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. The legal machinery was in motion, the evidence was documented, and Emma was safe. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together. The small figure in Emma's drawing stood firm between the shadows, no longer cowering or trying to please both sides. Like her granddaughter, Eleanor had finally stopped trying to balance everyone's needs and chosen to protect the one person who couldn't protect herself. The war for Emma's future was about to begin. Emma sat at the kitchen table, working on a charcoal drawing that showed a small figure standing between two towering shadows, one reaching out protectively, the other grasping with clawed hands. Another self-portrait? Eleanor asked gently. Emma nodded. Mrs. Torres says art helps process trauma. I'm calling this one the choice. Eleanor studied the drawing, noting how the protective shadow seemed to shield the small figure from the grasping one. Emma, you know this isn't really your choice to make. You're not responsible for choosing between adults who should both be protecting you. I know, Emma said quietly. But Mom doesn't see it that way. She never has. Outside, darkness was falling on what might be their last quiet evening before the custody battle began in earnest. Tomorrow would bring depositions, character assassinations, and Linda's desperate attempts to reclaim control over the daughter she'd spent years emotionally terrorizing. But Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in months: clarity. The legal machinery was in motion, the evidence was documented, and Emma was safe. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together. The small figure in Emma's drawing stood firm between the shadows, no longer cowering or trying to please both sides. Like her granddaughter, Eleanor had finally stopped trying to balance everyone's needs and chosen to protect the one person who couldn't protect herself. Linda's counterattack began Wednesday morning with surgical precision. Mitchell Barnes had clearly prepared his client well. Gone was the disheveled, rage-filled woman who destroyed Emma's art supplies. The Linda who appeared at David Kim's office for depositions wore a conservative navy dress, minimal makeup, and an expression of wounded motherhood that would have convinced strangers she was the victim. "My mother has always struggled with control issues," Linda testified, her voice steady and sorrowful. "When my father died, she transferred all her expectations onto me, then onto Emma, when I couldn't meet her impossible standards." Eleanor watched through the conference room's glass partition as Linda spun a narrative of manipulation and alienation. In this version, Eleanor was the overbearing grandmother who'd undermined Linda's parenting from birth, turning Emma against her own mother with expensive gifts and whispered criticisms. "Emma used to run to me when she was upset," Linda continued, dabbing her eyes with practiced precision. "But over the years, my mother convinced her that I was the problem. That grandma's house was safe and home was dangerous." David scribbled notes furiously. Eleanor recognized the strategy. Barnes was painting Linda as another victim of Eleanor's controlling behavior, making Emma's preference for her grandmother seem like the result of systematic manipulation rather than seeking refuge from abuse. "Mrs. Miller," Barnes pressed, "can you describe your mother's reaction when you tried to set boundaries around her involvement in Emma's life? She became increasingly invasive, showing up unannounced, questioning my decisions, documenting everything I did wrong. She treated my home like a case study rather than a family." Eleanor's chest tightened. Linda was weaponizing Eleanor's professional training, making her careful documentation of abuse seem like clinical detachment rather than protective intervention. The deposition continued for 2 hours, Linda systematically dismantling every piece of evidence Eleanor had gathered. The destroyed art supplies became, quote, "discipline for Emma's disrespectful behavior." The drunken rages became bad days that my mother exaggerated. The threats to relocate became a mother's desperate attempt to protect her daughter from a toxic grandmother. That evening, Emma appeared in Eleanor's doorway, clutching a sketch pad. "Grandma, Mom's lawyer called me today. He wants to interview me tomorrow." Eleanor's protective instincts flared. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd talk to him if you were there." Emma sat on the bed's edge, her artistic hands trembling slightly. "He said some things about you. About how you've been influencing me." "What kind of things?" "That you've been teaching me to hate my mom. That you record our conversations and coach me on what to say." Emma's voice grew smaller. "He made it sound like you're some kind of villain who's been manipulating me my whole life." Eleanor felt the familiar rage that came with watching adults weaponize a child's love. "Emma, look at me. Have I ever told you what to think about your mother? Number, you've always said you love her. Even when she..." Emma's voice trailed off. "Even when she..." "What?" "Even when she hurts us both." Emma opened her sketch pad, revealing a new drawing. A courthouse with 3 figures on the steps. One stood tall and steady, one cowered in shadows, and one pointed accusingly at the others. "I drew this after the lawyer called. I call it the truth." Eleanor studied the image, seeing Emma's understanding of the situation with painful clarity. The steady figure was Eleanor, the cowering one was Emma herself, and the accusing figure was Linda, pointing blame everywhere except inward. "Sweetheart, tomorrow is going to be difficult. Mr. Barnes will try to confuse you, make you doubt your own experiences. He might suggest that wanting to live with me means you don't love your mother. But that's not true. I know, but he'll try to make it seem true. Can you handle that?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, studying her artwork. When she spoke, her voice carried a maturity that broke Eleanor's heart. "Grandma, I've spent my whole life trying to make Mom happy by pretending her behavior was normal. I'm not going to start lying now to make lawyers happy." Eleanor pulled Emma close, feeling the weight of everything this child had endured. Tomorrow would bring the final battle. Mitchell Barnes attempting to break down a 16-year-old's testimony. Linda watching from across the courtroom as her daughter chose safety over family loyalty. But tonight, Emma was safe. Tonight she could draw her truth without fear of someone destroying it in a drunken rage. Whatever happened in court, Eleanor had already given Emma something Linda never could, the right to her own reality. The courthouse steps loomed ahead, just like in Emma's drawing. Soon, they would climb them together, carrying the truth Eleanor had spent months documenting, and Emma had spent years living. That afternoon brought a call from Emma's art teacher, Mrs. Torres. Eleanor, I received a visit from Linda's attorney today. He was asking about Emma's behavior in class, whether she'd ever spoken negatively about her mother, if I'd noticed signs of coaching or manipulation. Eleanor closed her eyes. What did you tell him? The truth, that Emma's artwork clearly depicts trauma and anxiety, that her behavior dramatically improves during stable periods at your home, and that she's never said anything negative about Linda that wasn't a direct response to something Linda had done. But Eleanor knew Barnes would find ways to twist even Mrs. Torres's professional observations. He'd suggest that Emma's improved behavior at Eleanor's house proved manipulation was working, that her trauma-themed artwork was the result of coaching rather than lived experience. The family courthouse Thursday morning felt like a battlefield disguised as a place of justice. Eleanor arrived with David at 8:30 a.m., noting Mitchell Barnes already positioned strategically near the entrance with Linda, who had transformed herself once again, this time into the picture of maternal desperation, complete with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling lower lip. Judge Patricia Hendrick's courtroom was smaller than Eleanor had expected, its wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting lending an institutional coldness to the proceedings that would determine Emma's future. Eleanor took her seat behind David's table, hyper-aware of Linda's presence 20 feet away. Your Honor, Barnes began, his voice carrying practiced sympathy. We're here because a vindictive grandmother has systematically alienated a child from her loving mother. Linda Miller is not perfect. What single mother is? But she loves her daughter and deserves the chance to parent without interference. David's opening was clinical, methodical. Your Honor, we're here because a child called her grandmother at 2:17 a.m., terrified and hiding in a closet while her intoxicated mother destroyed her belongings in a rage. This isn't about imperfect parenting. It's about emotional abuse and a pattern of behavior that threatens Emma's well-being. Judge Hendricks, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes, listened without expression. Eleanor had researched her extensively, former child advocate, known for cutting through manipulation to focus on children's needs. I'll hear from the psychologist first, Judge Hendricks announced. Dr. Vance took the stand with professional composure. Your Honor, I've evaluated Emma Miller extensively. She presents with classic symptoms of emotional trauma, hypervigilance, adult-level responsibility for managing parental emotions, and significant anxiety around disappointing authority figures. Barnes leaned forward. Dr. Vance, couldn't these symptoms result from a grandmother constantly criticizing the child's mother, creating anxiety about family loyalty? Unlikely. Emma's trauma responses are situation-specific. She relaxes completely in Mrs. Miller's presence, but becomes visibly tense when discussing returning to her mother's care. This suggests the trauma source is the mother's behavior, not conflicted loyalties. Eleanor watched Linda's face tighten at Dr. Vance's testimony. Barnes whispered something urgent in her ear. Dr. Vance, Barnes continued, Emma is 16. Isn't it possible she's simply rebelling against maternal authority, as teenagers do? Normal teenage rebellion doesn't involve panic attacks when a parent enters the room. Emma exhibits trauma responses, not typical adolescent behavior. David's questioning was thorough, establishing Emma's clear preference for Eleanor's guardianship, and Dr. Vance's professional opinion that removing Emma from her current placement would cause significant psychological harm. Next came Mrs. Torres, Emma's art teacher, whose testimony provided stark visual evidence. She'd brought a portfolio of Emma's work spanning 2 years. Pieces created during stable periods at Eleanor's house showed creativity and joy, while work from her mother's home depicted isolation, fear, and destruction. This piece, Mrs. Torres said, holding up a watercolor titled Safe Harbor, was created after Emma spent 2 weeks at her grandmother's house last summer. Compare it to this one. She displayed a dark charcoal drawing created after returning to her mother's care. The artistic expression clearly reflects Emma's emotional state. Barnes attacked Mrs. Torres's qualifications, suggesting art interpretation was subjective, but Judge Hendricks seemed more interested in the portfolio's chronological pattern than Barnes's objections. Then came Eleanor's testimony. David walked her through her professional background, her documentation methods, and the specific incidents that led to filing for custody. Mrs. Miller, describe the night you received Emma's call. Eleanor recounted the events with professional precision. Emma's terror, the sounds of destruction, Linda's threats, the systematic demolition of art supplies worth thousands of dollars. Barnes's cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Miller, you're 71 years old. Isn't this custody petition really about your fear of aging, your desire to relive your career through Emma's situation? This is about protecting a child from emotional abuse. A child you've systematically turned against her mother with expensive gifts and criticism of Linda's parenting? Eleanor met Barnes's glare steadily. I've never criticized Linda in Emma's presence. I've documented Linda's behavior to protect Emma. Documented like a caseworker, not a grandmother. You've treated your own family like a professional case study. I've used my professional training to recognize patterns of abuse and protect my granddaughter. Barnes produced Eleanor's leather notebook, reading selected passages that, stripped of context, made her sound clinically detached rather than protectively concerned. Linda's testimony was a masterpiece of manipulation. She portrayed herself as a struggling single mother, overwhelmed by an interfering parent who'd undermined her authority from Emma's birth. My mother never let me be Emma's parent, Linda testified, tears flowing convincingly. Every decision I made was questioned. Every difficulty was documented. Every mistake was held against me. Emma learned that Grandma's way was always better than Mommy's way. Under David's cross-examination, Linda's facade began cracking. Mrs. Miller, you testified that destroying Emma's art supplies was discipline. What exactly was Emma being disciplined for? She was being disrespectful. How specifically? Linda's composure wavered. She questioned my parenting decisions. By hiding in her closet? She was being dramatic. Mrs. Miller, you told your mother she was no longer your mother. Can you explain that statement? Linda's mask slipped completely. She chose Emma over me. My own mother chose my daughter over me. The courtroom fell silent. In that moment, Linda had revealed the core delusion that love was a zero-sum game, that Emma's need for safety was somehow a betrayal of maternal loyalty. Judge Hendricks called a recess. Eleanor watched Linda being consoled by Barnes, realizing her daughter had just destroyed her own case with raw honesty. The final testimony would be Emma's. Everything hinged on whether a 16-year-old could withstand Barnes's manipulation while telling her truth. Eleanor closed her eyes, praying that Emma's courage would hold. Emma entered the courtroom after recess with quiet dignity that belied her 16 years. She wore a simple blue dress Eleanor had bought her, not expensive enough to suggest manipulation through gifts, but nice enough to show respect for the proceedings. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, revealing a face that carried both youthful vulnerability and premature wisdom. Eleanor watched her granddaughter approach the witness stand, noting the slight tremor in Emma's hands as she was sworn in. Across the courtroom, Linda leaned forward intently, her earlier composure restored under Barnes's coaching during the break. Judge Hendricks's voice was gentle but authoritative. Emma, I know this is difficult. Take your time, speak clearly, and remember that you're here to help me understand what's best for you. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. David began with establishing questions, allowing Emma to find her rhythm. Emma, where do you currently live? With my grandmother, Eleanor Miller. How long have you been living there? Since Saturday night. 4 days. Can you tell the court why you're living with your grandmother instead of your mother? Emma's hands clasped together in her lap, knuckles whitening. My mother destroyed all my art supplies Saturday night. She was drunk and angry, and she broke everything that mattered to me. Had something like this happened before? Emma nodded. Many times. When Mom drinks, she gets angry about things that don't make sense. Usually it's about Grandma Eleanor. She thinks Grandma is trying to steal me away from her. Eleanor watched Barnes scribbling notes, preparing his attack on Emma's credibility. Emma, how do you feel when your mother drinks? Scared. The word came out barely above a whisper. When she starts drinking, I never know which version of her I'll get. Sometimes she cries and tells me she's sorry for being a bad mother. Sometimes she gets angry and breaks things. Sometimes she just disappears into her room for hours. What do you do when your mother is drinking? I try to stay out of her way. I do my homework in my room. I clean up whatever she's broken. I make sure the doors are locked. Emma's voice grew steadier as she spoke, as if naming these realities gave them less power over her. Emma, do you love your mother? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma looked directly at Linda for the first time since taking the stand. Yes, I love my mom very much. But loving someone doesn't mean it's safe to live with them. Linda's face crumpled at Emma's words, and Eleanor felt an unexpected stab of sympathy for her daughter. This was the tragedy Barnes would never understand. Emma's testimony wasn't motivated by hatred or manipulation, but by love constrained by reality. David continued methodically, establishing the pattern of Linda's behavior, Emma's coping mechanisms, and the stark contrast between Emma's emotional state at her mother's house versus her grandmother's. Emma, your grandmother has been accused of turning you against your mother. Is that true? No. Emma's voice was firm. Grandma Eleanor has never said anything bad about my mom in front of me. Even when I'm upset and want to complain about Mom's behavior, Grandma always reminds me that Mom is sick and needs help. Has your grandmother ever coached you on what to say about your mother? Grandma taught me that telling the truth isn't the same as being mean. She said I can love my mom and still acknowledge that her behavior hurts me. David's questioning continued for 30 minutes, painting a clear picture of Emma's experience. The girl's testimony was compelling, not because it was dramatic, but because it was matter-of-fact. She described her mother's drinking, rages, and emotional manipulation with the clinical detachment of someone who'd learned to survive by observing and adapting. Then came Barnes's cross-examination. Emma, Barnes began, his voice carrying false warmth. You've been living with your grandmother for 4 days. That's not very long to make such important decisions about your future, is it? I've been staying with Grandma Eleanor regularly since I was little. I know what it's like to live there. But this is different, isn't it? This time you're here in court, testifying against your own mother. How does that make you feel? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Eleanor could see her granddaughter processing the question, recognizing the trap Barnes was setting. I'm not testifying against my mother, Emma said finally. I'm testifying about what my life has been like. Those are different things. Barnes's eyebrows rose slightly. He hadn't expected such a sophisticated distinction from a teenager. Emma, your grandmother is 71 years old. Don't you think you should be with someone younger? Someone who can better relate to your needs as a teenager? Age doesn't determine understanding. Grandma Eleanor understands me better than anyone else in my life. But surely you'd prefer to live with your mother, in your real home, if she got better. The question was perfectly crafted. Barnes was asking Emma to choose between hope for her mother's recovery and her current safety. If my mother got better, really better, that would be wonderful, Emma said carefully. But she's been promising to get better for years. I can't keep waiting for someday while my life falls apart now. Barnes pressed harder. Emma, don't you think your mother deserves another chance? Don't you think families should stick together through difficult times? Eleanor watched Emma's composure waver for the first time. This was the emotional manipulation Emma had endured her entire life. The suggestion that protecting herself was somehow betraying family loyalty. I've given my mother hundreds of chances, Emma said, her voice beginning to shake. Every time she promised things would be different. Every time I believed her. But Mr. Barnes, how many chances am I supposed to give someone who keeps hurting me? Your mother loves you, Emma. Doesn't that count for something? Love isn't enough. The words came out stronger than Emma had probably intended. Love doesn't make the drinking stop. Love doesn't keep her from destroying my things when she's angry. Love doesn't make it safe for me to be honest about my feelings without triggering her rage. Barnes switched tactics, pulling out photographs of Emma's destroyed art supplies. Emma, these art supplies were expensive gifts from your grandmother, weren't they? Yes. Don't you think it was inappropriate for your grandmother to give you such expensive gifts without your mother's permission? Emma looked confused by the question. They were for my birthday and Christmas. Grandma Eleanor has always given me art supplies because she knows I love to draw and paint. But wouldn't more appropriate gifts have been things your mother could afford to replace if they were damaged? Eleanor felt anger flare at Barnes's implication that Emma should only receive gifts poor enough for Linda to casually destroy. Mr. Barnes, Emma said, her teenage indignation finally showing, are you suggesting that I should only be allowed to have things that my mother can afford to break when she's drunk? Judge Hendricks intervened. Mr. Barnes, please move to your next question. Barnes tried a different angle. Emma, your grandmother has kept detailed records of incidents at your mother's house. Did you know about this documentation? Yes. Didn't that make you feel like you were being watched, studied like a case study? Emma considered the question seriously. At first, it made me uncomfortable. But then Grandma Eleanor explained that if we ever needed to prove what was happening, we'd need evidence. She said adults don't always believe children about abuse unless there's proof. So you do consider this abuse? The question was meant to trap Emma into using loaded terminology, but she answered with heartbreaking simplicity. I consider it my life. Whether other people call it abuse doesn't change what I've experienced. Barnes spent another 20 minutes trying to break down Emma's testimony, suggesting she'd been manipulated, coached, or influenced by Eleanor's professional background. But Emma's responses remained consistent, detailed, and emotionally authentic. Finally, Barnes played his last card. Emma, if you could say anything to your mother right now, what would it be? Emma looked directly at Linda, tears finally spilling over. I would tell her that I love her, that I wish she could get help, that I dream about having a mother who doesn't scare me. Her voice broke. But I would also tell her that I can't keep sacrificing my safety for her comfort. I can't keep pretending her behavior is normal just to make her feel better about herself. Linda sobbed audibly at Emma's words, and Eleanor saw her daughter's pain with devastating clarity. Linda genuinely believed she was a loving mother whose child had been stolen by manipulation. The tragedy was that Linda's self-deception made her incapable of seeing how her behavior affected Emma. Judge Hendricks called for closing arguments. Barnes's closing was passionate, painting Linda as a victim of systematic alienation by a controlling mother-in-law who'd weaponized her professional training against her own daughter. He argued that Emma's preference for Eleanor was the result of years of subtle manipulation, expensive gifts, and criticism of Linda's parenting. Your Honor, Barnes concluded, families go through difficult periods. Linda Miller acknowledges she's made mistakes, but she loves her daughter and deserves the chance to parent without interference. Don't let a vindictive grandmother destroy what can still be healed. David's closing was methodical, walking through the evidence step by step. 43 documented incidents, medical records showing Emma's stress-related symptoms, professional evaluations confirming emotional trauma, and Emma's own testimony about living in constant fear. Your Honor, this isn't about imperfect parenting or family dysfunction. This is about a child who called her grandmother at 2:17 a.m., terrified and hiding in a closet, while her intoxicated mother destroyed her belongings in a rage. Emma Miller is not a case study or a prize to be won. She's a 16-year-old girl who deserves to live without fear. Judge Hendricks announced she would render her decision after a brief recess. Eleanor, David, and Emma waited in the courthouse hallway while Linda and Barnes huddled nearby. The silence was oppressive, broken only by Linda's occasional sobs. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Hendricks looked directly at Emma before speaking. Emma, I want you to know that every adult in this room claims to have your best interests at heart. My job is to determine which adult is actually capable of putting your needs first. She turned to address the full courtroom. I've reviewed extensive documentation of incidents at the Miller household spanning 8 months. I've heard testimony from medical professionals, educators, and family members. Most importantly, I've listened to Emma herself describe her lived experience. Eleanor held her breath. The evidence clearly establishes a pattern of emotional abuse and neglect. Linda Miller's alcohol abuse, emotional volatility, and systematic undermining of Emma's interests and safety create an environment harmful to the child's development and well-being. Linda's sobs grew louder, but Judge Hendricks continued. Mr. Barnes has argued that Eleanor Miller has alienated Emma from her mother, but the evidence suggests the opposite. Emma's testimony demonstrates sophisticated understanding of complex family dynamics, not the coached responses of a manipulated child. Her love for her mother is clear, but so is her recognition that love alone cannot create safety. Eleanor felt tears she'd been holding back for days finally spill over. Furthermore, concerns about Eleanor Miller's age are outweighed by her demonstrated competence, professional experience with traumatized children, and, most importantly, Emma's clear preference for her care. At 16, Emma is old enough for her preferences to carry significant weight in custody determinations. Judge Hendricks looked directly at Linda. Ms. Miller, you have the right to petition for visitation, but such visitation will be supervised and contingent upon your completion of substance abuse treatment and parenting classes. Emma's safety and well-being must take precedence over parental rights. The gavel came down with finality. Custody of Emma Miller is awarded to Eleanor Miller. This court is adjourned. Eleanor felt Emma collapse against her shoulder in relief so profound it seemed to drain all tension from the girl's body. Across the courtroom, Linda was sobbing into Barnes's shoulder, her world shattered by the legal confirmation of what Emma had been trying to tell her for years. David was shaking Eleanor's hand, talking about next steps and paperwork. But Eleanor barely heard him. Her granddaughter was safe. Finally. Legally, permanently safe. Outside the courthouse, Emma stood on the steps depicted in her drawing, no longer the small, cowering figure, but a young woman who'd found her voice and used it to save herself. "Are you okay?" Eleanor asked. Emma nodded, then shook her head, then laughed shakily. "I don't know. I feel guilty for being relieved. Is that awful?" "It's human," Eleanor said. "You can love your mother and still need protection from her. Those feelings don't cancel each other out." They walked to Eleanor's car in silence, both emotionally drained by the morning's proceedings. As Eleanor started the engine, Emma spoke quietly. "Grandma, do you think she'll ever get better?" "Really better?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. Linda would have to want recovery more than she wanted to be right, more than she wanted to be the victim, more than she wanted someone else to blame for her choices. It was possible, but not probable. "I hope so, sweetheart. But that's her choice to make. Our job now is to focus on your healing, your future, your art." Emma nodded, pulling out her sketch pad. She'd been working on a new drawing during quiet moments in the courthouse. Two figures walking together toward a sunrise, no longer looking over their shoulders at the shadows behind them. "What are you calling this one?" Eleanor asked. "New Beginning," Emma said. "Mrs. Torres says the best art comes from truth, even when the truth is difficult." Eleanor drove toward home, Emma's home now, legally and permanently, thinking about truth and healing and the courage it had taken for a 16-year-old to choose safety over family loyalty. Emma would carry scars from her childhood, but she would also carry the knowledge that she was strong enough to save herself when the adults who should have protected her failed. The afternoon sun slanted through the car windows as they drove through familiar neighborhoods toward the house that had always been Emma's safe harbor. There would be challenges ahead. Emma's therapy, Linda's supervised visitation attempts, the long process of healing from years of emotional trauma. But today, Emma Miller was free. Free to create art without fear of it being destroyed in drunken rages. Free to excel in school without guilt about surpassing her mother's achievements. Free to love her grandmother without it being interpreted as betrayal of maternal loyalty. Free to finally, truly be 16 years old. That evening, Eleanor called Maggie Foster with the news. Her old friend's voice carried deep satisfaction when she heard the outcome. "You did it, Eleanor. You saved her." Eleanor looked through the kitchen window at Emma, who was sitting in the backyard with her sketch pad, drawing by the light of the setting sun. For the first time in months, the girl's shoulders weren't tensed against anticipated attack. "No," Eleanor said quietly. "Emma saved herself. I just gave her a safe place to land." The legal battle was over, but the real work was just beginning, helping Emma heal from years of emotional trauma while building the stable, nurturing environment every child deserved. Eleanor was 71 years old, but she'd never felt more ready for a challenge. Outside, Emma held up her latest drawing, a house with warm light spilling from its windows and two figures visible through the glass, working side by side at a kitchen table. At the bottom, in Emma's careful handwriting, were two words: Safe Harbor. Eleanor smiled, understanding finally that some battles are worth fighting, some children are worth saving, and some love is strong enough to overcome years of damage and fear. Emma was home. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.